President Kerry, Rotarians, guests and visiting Rotarian. I'm delighted to introduce you, Robin Averill, Associate Dean of Teacher Education at Victoria University. Robin has over 15 years experience in initial teacher education and has previously worked in secondary schools, in national assessment and moderation at the NZQA, Qualifications Authority, and as a curriculum advisor to schools. Robin has written and edited a wide range of publications supporting primary and secondary school mathematics and statistics teaching and learning. Now, can you all please get out your calculators or pen and paper, because Robin's going to test you during her speech. Her research focuses on ways to enhance equity of access to achievement. She grounds her work in classroom practice and teachers' and students' views, and she's passionate about exploring how teachers can do an excellent job of developing all teachers' learning alongside nurturing learners' pleasure and confidence in their learning and their curiosity and thirst for more. And if you can do all that, wow. Robin, please, the phenomenal Robin Averill, can you please come and address that?
Thank you. There won't be a test, but unless you really beg me for one, I'll see what I can do. Thank you very, very much, Peter, and thank you, Kerry, and thank you for the invitation. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you for the lovely explanation of what I've been trying to do over the last 15, 20 years. I usually do make people do some maths when I address groups, but I won't be asking you to do maths, but there will be a task, so get yourself ready. I work in teacher education, and it's a very interesting time to be involved in teacher education at the moment. There's groups at the Education Council, at the Ministry, who are very interested. There are some new ways of training student teachers with exemplary programs that the Ministry is supporting for the first few years of development, the Masters of Teaching and Learning. And it's a great time when my colleagues at other universities, we're all working together to explore how we can do the very best job possible to create great teachers. So it's a very exciting space to be in, and I'm going to share a little bit of that excitement, hopefully, with you today. I thought I'd start with a whakatauki, he rangi tā mata whaiti, he rangi tā mata whānau. Those with narrow vision see a narrow horizon, and with a wide vision see a wide horizon. I'm using this for the talk because my interest area is in that of equity. So is the Ministry of Education. They have priority learners as their main focus, priority learners including Maori and Pacifica students. And so this is a vision for having all students being able to achieve as well as possible and make as wide a contribution as possible once they leave school. It's also our focus at Victoria University of Wellington. We also want to increase our numbers of Maori and Pacifica students. That's one of our target areas at the moment, and so any ways that we can enhance their learning in schools to come through to universities is what we're aiming for. So just a short talk, but I thought I would give us a wide view of initial teacher education and try and show you some of the things that we are trying to do with our student teachers before they graduate. My particular focus is on participation of Maori and Pacifica, and I want us to think about schools, the places where teachers work, as being embedded in society, and what impact that can have for our student teachers and for learners. I could tell you that we teach people how to teach mathematics, which is my particular area. We teach people how to teach science, how to teach music, but you probably wouldn't be at all surprised about those things. And you might not be surprised about the other things that we try and do also, but I thought I'd focus on what we call the front end of the curriculum. The content area is what we think about as the back end of the curriculum, because physically in the national curriculum document, all those things are listed in the back, the what we want to teach. But the front part is more about how we want the teaching to happen and what we want for our students as learners. So we're thinking there about how are we teaching these students as people. And that's the part that I'm going to look at today. So in the front part of the curriculum, what we're having to help our student teachers with, to come to grips with, is to think about what are the guiding principles and the guiding values and the competencies that we are hoping for our students in primary and secondary schools. So now comes your task, and think about your own organisation or your own work or the groups that you work with, and think about what kinds of principles do you hold for your work? What kind of values guide your work? And what kind of competencies do you want in the people that are working with you and that you're working for? So to have a think about those kinds of things, and to think about how do you portray those, and what do you want from us in terms of teachers in schools to help students come through with in terms of these things. The curriculum's got quite a lot to say on each of those areas, and as an overview, there are 8 principles in the left-hand column, there are 8 values in the middle, and there are 5 competencies. I've just tried to put them all on one slide, and there's a little bit of matching that you can see across the ideas. But with all of our student teachers, the things that we're trying to help them when they're teaching, when they're working with students, is to me promoting these ideas, these big ideas, these principles, these values, and to develop these competencies. Here they're just words. The curriculum gives some support for each of these different things in terms of what does this look like when we're teaching in the classroom, and how can we see progress in terms of these things. So we're trying to help the students come to grips with all of this as they're teaching their science, their physics, their French, their te reo Maori, whatever it is that they're teaching. However, because of the priority areas that the ministry has, there are also other guiding, supporting documents and policy. So we're also trying to work on 2 other things, in particular with the groups that I've mentioned before. There's a document called Tā Taiako, and that's a joint document from the Ministry of Education and the Education Council, and that is about competencies for teachers of Maori learners. So we're trying to help our student teachers with coming to grips with how can we do a great job of teaching Maori students, and how can we use these key competencies that have been identified. There's also a Pacifica education plan, which the ministry holds, and for its supporting agencies, which is aimed at doing a great job for making sure Pacifica learners learn very well in school. So these are also influences that we're trying to help student teachers come to grips with and represent in their teaching. There's perhaps more challenges with these. So the cultural competencies are these: ako, whanaungatanga, manaakitanga, wānanga, tangata whenua-tanga. So we can translate those words, we can do our best to translate those words into English, but unless we have a really in-depth cultural understanding of what those words mean, it's going to be hard for us to put those things in practice. Some of our student teachers come with a good understanding of things Māori, or a very good understanding. Some come with no te reo Māori pronunciation, so we're also trying to help them with that alongside develop their understanding of what do these things mean in practice. The Pacifica Education Plan has these values as being important for Pacifica groups: leadership, family, service, inclusion, belonging, respect, spirituality, love, reciprocal relationships. So that's another layer where we're trying to understand for Pacifica learners, these are things that we're trying to make sure are reflected in our classrooms, in our work with students and their families, and are reflected in our schools. Sometimes the values that a school holds sound wonderful, but when you're in classrooms, sometimes the traditional practice that we've inherited doesn't always seem to reflect the practice really well. So we try to help the student teachers to critique their own practice, to think carefully about what it is they're doing, how they're doing it, and what impact that's going to have on the students. What are they doing because that's the way that they were taught, and what effects are those things happening, and what are the way that they're teaching that, getting tongue-tied now, because my time limit must be just about coming.
You've got 7 minutes.
7 more minutes, I might have to start again. So to come back to the idea of schools being culturally embedded, and to come back to our idea of wanting more Pacifica and Maori students at the university and to come through to teacher education. School staff rooms aren't particularly well balanced in proportions to the ethnicities of people in society. Unless we can get more Maori and Pacifica students coming through into teaching, those staff rooms are becoming less and less representative of New Zealand society, and harder for all of us to address these Pacifica values, the Maori cultural competencies, as well as those similar ideas from other cultural groups that are within the school. So when you think about the work that we do with student teachers, yes, we teach them how to teach maths, absolutely, and numeracy, and science, absolutely. But we also have in our minds that they're teaching people, and the best ways of teaching people is to address these visions and values and competencies. So what we're trying to do is to use all of those ideas to help create excellent, wonderful teachers with a very wide vision of what education can be and what the students in their classrooms can achieve, regardless of who they are. So thank you very much.
Now you'll have to answer questions, aren't you? So lots of questions. Away you go, Bishay.
Well, I'm certainly very old, and when I looked at...
What'd you say? Very
old?
Old.
And when I looked at Pacifica values, I would say that in the north of Scotland, where I had a Mrs. Holloway who taught me, those were the values that she actually inculcated in us. And so it's really interesting that they're Pacifica values, but actually they're quite inclusive values, aren't they?
Yes.
So thank you for putting them.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think that about the Maori cultural competencies as well, is actually they're about doing very great teaching, very effective practice of working with people. And so the more that we can, it's not just that they work for one particular group, but actually they help us do a better job with everybody in our classrooms. Absolutely.
Lee, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. How would you see that being, for those of us who went to like traditional schools, what would we see happening in the classroom that would be different then?
I think there would be more presence of family in the school and involvement in the classroom work in one way or another, either through supporting homework or in decision making about the school. Both of the documents talk about the importance of family being involved, and it is really a ministry push for schools to have the community involved in what's happening in the classroom. So it's not just the student and the teacher that their learning is happening through, but it's a triad, the student, teacher, family, and the whole group together working to make sure that the student's learning whatever else they need. So I think that would be one difference. Another difference might be more discursive classrooms, a lot more discussion happening, but discussion with a purpose. So that it's open problems where people can share ideas, problem solving with sharing ideas towards a common purpose. I think we probably also have classrooms where instead of English being the only visible language, that there were other things, and whether it's other examples from other heritages that are available in the classroom, either through words or cultural diagrams or artwork or those kinds of things. Some of the research that I've been involved in, some students feel that they aren't able to bring who they are to school. They have to leave that at the gate. Some Maori students who see signage and the English is in a slightly bigger font than the dual te reo Māori. They see that, even though it was a longer word, is probably why it's a smaller font to fit it in the same, but they take messages from how, people take messages from every kind of way that we portray information. So that's a small answer to a big question.
Richard, then Tony.
The proportion of Maori in medical training is, in the last year or two, has just reached the same proportion of Maori in the population. You mentioned there's an imbalance in teaching. What are the statistics there? How many are coming through? What's the current ratio among teachers?
Amongst teachers, it's really hard to get that information. Amongst our student teachers, some of our programs, it's around 8%, 7% that are Pacifica or smaller, and the same for Maori. So that's not really the same proportions as the population. And in different qualifications it varies. So for early childhood might have higher proportion of Pacifica within those programs than for secondary. Across the university there are certain faculties that have very much lower rates than others. We were shared the data the other day. So there are some faculties where there are far lower proportions of Pacifica students. Education does quite well with about 7% overall, but they're not all in teacher education programs, and that's lower than the population. So that's great for medical students.
Yeah, I've got you, Roger. I'll just do Tony first and then Roger. Tony.
There was an interesting couple of programs on television, The Secret Lives of 4-year-olds, which was quite fascinating to watch. How do you thread through this recognition, or when do young people start to develop their own set of values? When do they start to develop their ethical and moral compass, and how do the teachers, what's the role of the teachers in imbuing those three things?
That's a very good question. Usually I teach mathematics.
Yeah, but 1 + 1 makes 3. That's why you've got to do the moral bit.
Yes, and I think in terms of mathematics, the way I like teaching, that helps us do these kinds of things better than just textbook, lots of practice exercises, which is just really repeating something over and over again rather than doing mathematics, is to have open, rich tasks that are engaging, that I care about, that are something related to real life, that I can discuss with others. And it's in that discussion where people can bring what they know about outside of school to help answer the problem. And working together, I don't think that that answers your question. I think that we talk a lot about the hidden curriculum. So the visible curriculum is what you see happening in the classrooms, but the hidden curriculum is all the subtle messages that students pick up. For example, the ethnicities of the cleaners at the school and the ethnicities of the teachers. The subtle messages that we can't help but students pick up through the things that they're part of. So I think everything we do at school and we need to think about and critique in terms of how those messages are foreseen. The situation I was alluding to in terms of values and how students pick up, the schools often have values like respect is a particular one, which is very important, but it should be seen in everything that happens at the school, the way the teachers interact with the students, not just the way the students interact with each other and the students interact with. And if we use that lens to critique some traditional practices, then it helps us understand the messages that are happening.
Roger?
Robin, what work is being done with our voluntary elected boards of trustees to enable them to assist and support our new graduates from our teaching organisations who are trying to implement those values? Because that seems to be a core issue at stake when a lot of the varying levels of expertise and experience in being able to run the schools.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I think the people who give time on boards of trustees give a huge commitment and a huge contribution. I'm not an expert on how they are given information about what happens with new graduates. I think that often the support for new graduates, it's left to the principal, the leadership team within the school to manage a program of support. I can't answer that question because I haven't had a lot to do with the boards of trustees, but usually for our graduates, when they win their first positions, the support is the colleagues around them and the support system within the school.
And finally, John.
Robin, that was an interesting talk. Can I just be slightly critical?
Yes, please do.
Where did those Maori values actually come from? Who was the source of them? And the reason I ask is that they seem to me to be rather modern, and they appear to me to be even somewhat through Pakeha or modern Maori eyes. They don't appear to me to be traditional, like the role of Kamatua, even Tahonga, the role of Utu. They're not very traditional, and I just wonder who actually derived them.
Yes, that is a very good question, and I've heard similar critique of them as well, and I don't know who, but it would have been a group that would have been pulled together. I know some of the people that were on the group who held, so that they produced a booklet jointly together, which for each of those 5 unpacks them in terms of what you would expect of student teachers as they're just entering the profession. When they've got some years of experience, what kinds of things you'd expect from a registered teacher, and if they're a leader in the school, what kinds of things you would expect. They've got some outcomes in terms of what you'd think you would hear students saying if that cultural competency was well in place, and outcomes in terms of whānau and family. I think it's an intermediate step, so that it's an accessible step, but I agree with you, there has been critique about the depth of those. I think for those and the Pacifica values, there's a lot more that sits behind that it's hard to understand without a deep heritage in those cultural groups. So I think that this is a tool and a stepping stone.
But we're out of time, I'm sorry. So can I ask Peter to come up and thank you? Please, do you want to take your stuff? Yes.
Robin, thank you very much for a fascinating, interesting and demanding, in some respects, address. I think from the number of questions that there were, you certainly piqued people's interest. Interesting, I think there are a lot of organisations that think about guiding principles, values and competencies. To see it happening in the teaching profession, great. I think that's long overdue. I'm sure it's always been there, but seeing it refreshed, and particularly with the focus on equity and diversity, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes to see the changes come through in student teachers, and then to see the changes happen in lifting Maori and Pacifica education standards. I wish you very well with your projects, current and future, and would like the club to thank you in the usual way. Thank you.